where the grand jury examining former President Trump's alleged role in attempting to overturn the 2020 election is meeting today, as another Trump indictment is potentially imminent, according to the former president himself. And joining me now, Andrew Weissman. Andrew, former FBI counsel, of course, talk to us about, what is imminent? What are all the signals, aside from what Donald Trump has said on Truth Social, expecting it, and the fact that his lawyers had been brought in, and he did get a target letter on July 18th.
Right. So the fact that he got a target letter means that it is highly likely that there are going to be charges, particularly in a case like this, where it's so high profile, you wouldn't issue that letter unless you fully expected to do so. We were all waiting. I certainly was waiting to hear that the defense counsel had met with the prosecutors to make a last-ditch effort. That's also a clear sign that always happens with good prosecutors, that you give the defense lawyers that opportunity to be heard. And so I fully expect that if it's not today, it's going to be Thursday. I would strongly suspect that it would be today unless there's some witness or witnesses who the grand jury really needs to hear from. And the reason for that is that Jack Smith clearly understands the clock. He clearly understands that in order to bring a case before the general election, and if you want to have it before the general election, you need to bring it. And so as soon as it is ready, you can be sure that he is going to bring it. And so the key thing I'm looking for, in addition to are there charges, is who is the assigned judge, because that's going to tell us pretty much everything about the timing of when this case would go to trial.
Now, just to drill down on that for just a second, Andrew, because the judges in D.C., the federal judges, are very experienced with this. They've been hearing numerous cases of the lower, targets here, the people who were involved in the, January 6th itself. But there's a possibility here. This is not just Donald Trump. This could be some of Donald Trump's alleged co-conspirators. We don't know that yet. We don't know the universe from all the people who worked around him in the White House, as well as those who were in his legal team, his outside legal team.
Absolutely, and that is a big open question as to whether there will be co-defendants. You and I and others have talked a lot about, the more co-defendants, the harder it might be to bring this to trial, especially if they're all in one case. You can imagine, though, it's possible we may see multiple cases where they have Donald Trump in one case and other people in another case. People who are sort of, I think, maybe worried about their fate today are people like John Eastman, a lawyer who gave advice to the former president about what he could do in terms of overthrowing the election. Jeffrey Clark, a particularly disloyal person at the Department of Justice who seems, by all accounts, to have been less than candid with his own bosses and was willing to say that the Department of Justice had opened a fraud investigation, even though many people have testified under oath that there was no fraud. And so those two people, I think, must be very concerned about their fate today or this week in terms of whether they are charged. But as you said, there could be other people, everything from Mark Meadows to Rudy Giuliani to lesser-known names who could also be facing criminal charges as well. But all remains to be seen as to how Jack Smith goes about those very difficult charging decisions.
And Andrew, please stay with us. I want to bring in NBC's Garrett Hake, Washington Post investigations reporter Jackie Alamany, and NBC Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian. So, Garrett, President Trump unleashing all of his recent attacks, but this morning he's been relatively quiet.
Yeah, it was a bunch of reposts this morning on his Truth Social platform. Nothing new this morning. Trump world appears to be in kind of a ready posture right now. I've talked to a couple of people in and around the Trump orbit who are anticipating something could happen as soon as today, but they were also anticipating that last week. So they are operating on the same limited amounts of information that we have, except for one. They had obviously that meeting between Mr. Trump's attorneys and the special counsel's office last Thursday that kind of got overshadowed by the superseding indictment in the classified classified documents case. But as best I can tell, nothing in that meeting shook their broader belief that an indictment is coming. It's simply a matter of when. And they and their allies have statements drafted, kind of talking points ready to go. They've long expected he'd be indicted in this case. Whether it's this week or next week, it's sort of immaterial.
You know, and it could be today. This is for them certainly sort of a hold your breath moment. Jackie Alemany, Jack Smith's low profile through these investigations has made him a top political target for both Trump and his congressional Republican allies. But Ken, I just want to, Jackie, hold on a second. I want to bring in Ken Delaney because you're just a few blocks away at the Justice Department through the morning. And we've seen some activity with the grand jury just now.
Yeah, that's right. We've seen grand jurors come in today and report as they generally do on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Andrea. And look, we're 2 weeks to the day since former President Donald Trump announced to the world that he got a target letter in this case. And so that's one of the reasons we're on indictment watch. And there are other reasons as well. And one of the big questions would be, how would we learn about an indictment if, in fact, it's handed up by the grand jury today? And it may well simply be that we get it like we do many other indictments that the Department of Justice announces every day via press release and with the indictment attached, because it's not necessary that an indictment be sealed once it's handed up by the grand jury, or it could be promptly unsealed if, in fact, there's a reason to seal it. And so, you know, it's also a standard practice for the Department of Justice. Happened in the Mar-a-Lago case when Trump was the first to tell the world he had been indicted. So obviously, as Andrew and others said, one of the big questions is, will there be co-defendants if there's an indictment of Donald Trump? Will there be cooperators? Will anyone be arrested? In it, all fascinating, dramatic questions that we're all awaiting the answers to, Andrea.
And Ken, gentlemen, and Jackie Alemany, we've just heard from Daniel Barnes, our colleague at the courthouse, that the grand jurors were seen leaving or coming downstairs to the cafeteria for lunch. Whether they've finished their job or not, they're apparently going to get a lunch break. So let's all wait on that. Jackie, we're talking about Jack Smith's very low profile, of course, throughout these investigations. We've not seen any, you know, maybe one public statement from him, in my recollection. But it's made him such a top political target for both the Trump and congressional Republican allies.
Yeah, Andrea, so low profile that Atlanta's Fani Willis said that she doesn't think that she would even recognize Jack Smith if he was sitting next to her in an interview this past weekend, as she's also concurrently getting ready to drop charges against the former president. But what we know so far is this idea of a Trump tax, which is the associated cost of providing protection to the people that have been involved with these investigations into former President Donald Trump. We know that the Justice Department spent $1.9 million to pay U.S. Marshals to protect Jack Smith and along with members of his family. Of course, this is a big sum, but not uncommon when it comes to the people who have come under the limelight for leading these prosecutions into Trump. We know that Alvin Bragg, similarly, the security costs in the Manhattan DA's office went up as well. And there is some anticipation here that it's only going to get worse once this indictment drops. Jack Smith obviously already dropped, you know, the indictment against former President Trump and his co-defendants last month in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. But there is a feeling here that security precautions might need to be even greater when it comes to this indictment, just because of the loaded aspect of what Jack Smith is going to be uncovering. After all, you know, this all started with you know, the former president encouraging his supporters and allies to storm and attack the U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
And so, Andrew, picking up on that, what Jackie's just said, there's the issue of whether or not they find some criminal element of incitement. That is an open question. Whether there's a conspiracy to overturn the election, whether the fake electors in one or more states are involved. You know, there is a wide range of what could be. Do you expect it to be a very detailed indictment if it comes down, and to the same level of detail we saw, for instance, in the Mar-a-Lago indictment?
Yeah. So with respect to detail, I think there's no question that this is going to be what we used to call a speaking indictment. It's going to provide chapter and verse, very much, as you mentioned, Andrea, that we saw in the documents case in Florida. And no doubt we will learn additional details, even though obviously we know quite a bit from the January 6th committee. I think there'll be a lot to dissect. With respect to the charges, a key thing that I think I am looking for and others are wondering is whether the charges will include some kind of allegation with respect to the use of force. People may remember who have been monitoring this that the use of force is a necessary component if you bring a seditious conspiracy charge. That is a charge that's been brought against the Oath Keepers, for instance, or certain members of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. But it does require that element of use of force. And so it'll be interesting to see whether Jack Smith and his team have that connective tissue of the White House to the actual use of force on January 6th. The same thing with respect to insurrection charges, whether they have that ability to link up. But I think there's no question that they will have an obstruction count. That's something that has been brought against many people already at the sort of foot soldier level. It's hard to imagine that with charges at that level, that it's not going to be brought against the alleged ringleader of the conspiracy.
And let's not forget, folks, what we're talking about here in terms of history, because if this indictment comes down and if it's against Donald Trump, as he himself expects, this would be the first time a former president would be charged, accused in a criminal indictment of trying to overturn an election. The first time in American history that will ever have taken place. So this is really the biggest issue facing the country and our politics, and of course the former president himself. Our thanks to everyone: Garrett Haake, Andrew Weissman, of course the former lead counsel on the Mueller investigation, Jackie Alamany from the Washington Post, and Ken Delanian at the Justice Department. Thanks to all of you for starting us off on a very big day here. And separate tracks. How can the Fulton County investigation and Jack Smith's other special counsel investigation avoid colliding as they both investigate Donald Trump's actions around the 2020 election? That's next, when Andrea Mitchell reports is back in just 60 seconds, right here on MSNBC.
Alive with delicious Mexican flavors. Daily Mix. Find us in the frozen aisle.
Remember why you became a nurse? You wanted to help people. And girl, you're just getting started. You know what's next. Getting your graduate degree. That's how you can change this place for the better. For yourself, your patients, the whole community. You want to make change happen? Walden University is all about change. It's time.
Walden University, set a course for change.
As we await potential charges against Donald Trump from special counsel Jack Smith today, Georgia's DA, Fani Willis, is signaling that she is proceeding with her separate investigation on many of the same issues and says she is not coordinating with a special counsel. Willis told a reporter, "I don't know what Jack Smith is doing, and Jack Smith doesn't know what I am doing. In all honesty, if Jack Smith was standing next to me, I'm not sure I would know who he was." Joining me now is Greg Bluestein, political reporter for the Atlantic Journal-Constitution. Greg, thanks so much for being with us. So why is Willis going to such lengths to highlight a lack of coordination between her and Smith's investigations, to even say she wouldn't know who he was, which is